The fort at Palakkad is very tiny compared to other forts of India. At times it seems this is a model scaled down, replicated and built to train young soldiers through war games. But they say appearances can be deceptive. And although the ramparts are low, nor the moat very wide or deep, this place, occupying a strategic location, has played a decisive role in the history of the region. It was commissioned by Hyder Ali in the last quarter of the 18th century and has witnessed many skirmishes and historic battle between the sultans of Mysore, Zamorin of Calicut and the British.
The town of Palakkad is situated at a distance of about 200 kilometers from Cochin in the state of Kerala. It is like a pass in the Malabar region that is used by travelers from the Western Ghats to enter Tamil Nadu. Besides, one can walk along the coast to reach the erstwhile state of Mysore. Tipu Sultan appreciated its strategic location very well and reinforced this fortress. All that is required in a fort is present here: a moat, ramparts, towers, and armored gates.
This Hyder Ali, he was thinking of a chance to access to Kerala. At that time, the Palakkad Raja, his name was Kombiachan. He was threatened by this Samudri Raja. He sought the help of this Hyder Ali, and Hyder Ali took that chance to get to invade Kerala, and he was captured up to Ponnani, the Arabian Sea. Hyder Ali take over this fort, and he engaged the French engineer to complete this fort.
The fort was originally commissioned by Hyder Ali in the 18th century. Though small in size, it could adequately serve its military purpose at that time. Neither Hyder Ali nor his successor Tipu ever felt the need to build a larger fort here. A small garrison of soldiers deployed here was enough to deter and control the Zamorin of Malabar. By that time, all the other forts of Malabar had fallen under his control. This fort at Palakkad was an important link in that chain.
At the time of constructing this, it was simply to keep the armed forces. That was the purpose. But after the construction of this fort, he realized that it is a very crucial position. The two tributaries of the famous Bharatapuzha is running on the eastern side as well as on the western side of this fort. That's very important. He realized this importance, and he operated the other operations, Tipu's further operations to Coimbatore invasion from here.
Aarti continues to be performed regularly in the Anjaneya temple that is built by the side of the main gate guarding the entrance. This shrine bears testimony to Tipu's spirit of tolerance and belies the British propaganda that Tipu was a fanatic Muslim who persecuted Hindus.
The story of this fort at Kannur is more than 500 years old. This fort looks very different from any other fort in India, and it is only natural because the fort was commissioned and constructed not by an Indian but by a foreigner. It was in the last decade of the 15th century that the great explorer Vasco da Gama set foot on Indian soil and declared proudly that he had discovered India. What he had discovered was not actually India but the sea route connecting Europe with the subcontinent. The Portuguese, however, lost no time in claiming the land on behalf of their king, and a viceroy was appointed. It was the first Portuguese viceroy, Don Francisco de Almeida, who laid the foundation stone of this fort. The Portuguese are Roman Catholics, and it is not surprising that the fort was named after a saint, Saint Angelo.
In the same state of Kerala, the Kannur fort that stands at a distance of 110 kilometers from Calicut has been strategically very significant. For centuries, this region of Malabar has served as an important halting stage for international traders. It has a natural port that served as a haven and entrepot. This fort was built not due to any imperialistic drive or to serve any military need, but to facilitate trade and commerce.
Kannur was an important trading center even before the arrival of the Portuguese. The Vijayanagara rulers used to get horses through the maritime roads of Kannur. The Portuguese wanted to set up a fortress there to control the trade of Kannur. Portuguese had already contacted Kannur port as early as 1501. In 1505, they set up the first fortress in Kannur, but its completion happened only in 1508.
By the end of the 15th century, many European explorers had reached India. The temptation to control the lucrative spice trade was strong. The Portuguese were followed by the Dutch, French, and the British, and they began to fight with each other to establish supremacy. Whoever had a stronger fleet dominated the scene. The pirates were ready to take advantage of their strife. The Zamorin, the local ruler, was always harassed. He had experienced sailors in his navy, but was unable to match the British. The start of the 16th century was a period of bloody conflict marked by a number of sea battles. The Portuguese didn't allow any other power to establish a foothold here. Their leader, Vasco da Gama, was widely respected. He collected immense riches and earned a great reputation.
There's a plethora of people working in these armies. There are Pathans, there are Europeans, there are Portuguese, there are European deserters, there are mixed castes, there are Marathas, there are local Lashkars. So this is a very, very cosmopolitan, extremely, sort of a regional representative of the 16th, 17th, 18th century globalization which is going on. This is where how parts of the Indian regional economy are being integrated with the world economy at this point in time. The conduit being the European companies who are playing a very important role in generating revenues and generating trading.
The Portuguese never had to make elaborate arrangements for the defense of this fort. The roaring sea provided enough protection. The sentries posted on the high walls could spot the approaching enemy and direct their cannons to destroy the ships. The fort is so skillfully constructed that none of the buildings inside it can be seen from the outside and be easily targeted. Even after you enter the fort, many of the buildings below ground level remain invisible. The fort at Kannur wasn't built to guard any palace or city, but was used as a warehouse situated conveniently near a port. Arrangements were made to house a handful of soldiers.
Because there is revenue, the revenue has to be stored, there are treasures, and where there are treasures, where there are revenues, where there is trade, there is brigandage, there is robbery, and the elite feels insecure, and there is even bands of peasants or bands of robbers could be lying in wait to take away the money or take away the trade or whatever, raid the trade. So it's an area of piracy, all kinds of things are happening at the same time in the early modern period.
Most of the guns placed in this fort face the sea, but a few are turned towards the land. It was their artillery that allowed the Portuguese to establish themselves in India. A tall mast stands on the roof of the fort. It was used by the sentries as a watchtower to scan the horizon.
Dutch captured this fort in 1600, and then after that, in the end of 1600, they sold to Arakkal family, royal family. In Kannur, there were two royal families. One was Chirakkal, that was Kolathiri, and the other was Arakkal. Arakkal was a Muslim dynasty, maybe one of the oldest Muslim dynasty of Kerala. But Chirakkal is ruled by Kolathiri, and the Arakkal ruled by Muslim family, and that too a female queen was.
All the buildings in this fort were erected by the Portuguese, not for military but for commercial purposes. Had the British not ousted them, we could have encountered many more forts like these in the region.
The fort at Bekal is among the largest and the most impressive of all the forts in Kerala. At the height of its glory, its ramparts enclosed an area of land close to 40 acres and towered over the waves of the sea that guards it. Historians tell us that the present fort is about 300 years old and was built by one Shivappa Nayak belonging to Iraqi dynasty that became powerful here and asserted its independence after the decline of the Vijayanagar Empire. Others, however, maintain that there existed an even older fort on this site built by the Kolathari kings that was only repaired and enlarged by the Nayaks. With passage of time, the fort passed under the control of Tipu Sultan of Mysore, who was the most powerful presence on the western seaboard of India in the later half of the 18th century.
Bekal is at a distance of 80 kilometers from Mangalore. It belongs to that interesting chapter of the history of India's western seaboard that chronicles the multi-cornered naval warfare between different European powers. Towards the end of the 18th century, Hyder Ali and Tipu of Mysore state were willingly or unwillingly drawn into this conflict. It was during this phase that the Bekal fort played a significant role. Hyder Ali, assisted by European advisors, started building a navy. The British government in Bombay, perceiving the threat, dispatched a fleet to destroy this budding armada. Tipu too tried to build up a naval force, but couldn't succeed. He befriended the French to fight the British. The French too were unable to match the British sea power. Tipu was constrained to remark ruefully, "The British are no match for me on land, but I can't defeat their friend, the sea."
Jetting into Arabian Sea and having a panoramic view of the entire land from the west also, considering the strategical and military significance of this fort, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan further strengthened this Bekal fort, and they made this fort as their cardinal point, as their citadel for their later military expeditions.
There are a number of towers on the ramparts. In addition to these, set apart, are some more massive and tall towers that were used not only to scan the sea, but also to monitor movement within the compound, sprawling over the undulating terrain. Tipu's struggle against the British continued in the last years of the 18th century. He realized the potential of their navy and reinforced the fortifications at Bekal.
When the second Mysore war was going on between the British and Tipu Sultan was compelled to surrender a good portion of his territory to the British by the Treaty of Mangalore. But Tipu Sultan was very particular to see that Bekal fort and the surrounding area is to be kept with him.
The The gates of this fort aren't very large, nor are they clad with strong armor. The main passage turns sharply at the entrance, and only a narrow gate provides access to the sea.
Bakel Fort came into the hands of the British only after the martyrdom of Tipu Sultan. Then the British further strengthened this Bakel Fort and made Bakel Fort as their military capital.
The most impressive structure in Bakel is a massive tower that can be climbed using a wide ramp. It appears that this was used to roll up heavy cannons in time of war.
The fort architecture at Bakel shows a strong influence of the fort at Kannur. Like that fort, this too was conceived as a garrison fort, where no prince dwelt, but only soldiers were deployed who camped here. And perhaps this is the reason we do not encounter any palace within these ramparts. Of course, there are dozens of underground passages and basements where ammunition was stored. Entry to these places was banned for civilians in past, as it continues to be done so in present. At the entrance of the fort stands a temple dedicated to Hanuman, where worship is still offered.
Construction work was done by the people of Karnataka, and perhaps the rulers, they brought them here, and the art forms also they carried, like Theyyams. The cultural art forms were brought in to this land by the rulers of, naturally, from Karnataka.
Theyyam is an integral part of Kerala's folk culture. It anoints departed ancestors with divinity. Besides glorifying the past, the dancers mesmerize their audience with a breathtaking display, heroic and fierce at the same time. Theyyam performances are part of the same pluralistic heritage of Kerala that celebrates diversity. The people of this state have lovingly and with great care preserved their literary and cultural legacy.